Hello and welcome to Ascension Podcasts. I am Selina, your host. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. On today's show, my special guest is James Quinn. He is a IEMT and hypnotherapist. Hello, James. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me this morning.
Thank you for joining us today. Please tell us about the therapies that you offer.
Okay, so I was originally trained as a hypnotherapist,
okay,
but then went on to do lots of other different therapies, including NLP, and something I use mostly now is integral eye movement therapy, or IEMT for short. People come to me for lots of different reasons. As a hypnotherapist, I get lots of people with lots of different, some might come for weight loss, they want to stop smoking, anxiety, panic attacks, a whole range of things. And I kind of look at things from two perspectives. When someone calls me up and wants a treatment, I think, right, okay, is this something to do with an emotion? Is this an emotion or a feeling that they're having trouble with, or is it a behaviour?
Oh, that's interesting. So
that's kind of how and there's obviously an interplay between the two. So I used to do a lot of stop smoking sessions,
okay,
and that's a behaviour. So they want to stop smoking, they're doing something they don't want to do, they're finding trouble stopping by themselves, so they come to me to try and stop smoking. So that's a behaviour.
So addictions are behaviours. They're
behaviours, okay, but nothing happens in isolation, right? We're a whole system, so they might be doing something.
Yeah.
And it's addictions. I think we've jumped to one of the third questions here.
Oh, you've got the questions ready then. You've read them through. That's good.
Obviously, there's emotions that might be driving the behaviour. So if someone's unhappy or something, they might then if someone's got an emotional problem or they're unhappy with something, they then might go down the addiction route to cope with life. So there might be an underlying feeling that they're trying to avoid or get away from. If they've got a stressful life, a cigarette helps me unwind, this kind of thing.
So you've got to decipher if it's a behaviour or if it's an emotion, because you offer different therapies, don't you? So you need to work out what you're going to offer someone at a given time.
Yeah. And during a session, I might work behaviourally with working on changing their behaviour, but then it might become apparent that there's you can't necessarily do that without dealing with the emotion that's driving it. So then I might have to change tactic and work with the emotions. But the IEMT, the integral eye movement therapy, it works primarily with the emotions.
Okay.
So
can you explain what that is, the eye movement therapy? What is IEMT and how does it help? How does it help people? We'll come on to the PTSD in a minute, but the IEMT is interesting. What is it exactly?
Sure. So this was developed by Andrew T. Austin, a guy called Andrew T. Austin. And he worked as a neurologist. And when he noticed that as an exercise in neurology, I think doctors were using this to work out neurological problems. So they would get a patient to just follow the finger backwards and forwards like this. And he was working in this department with the neurologists, and he noticed little blips in the eye movements, and he became curious about it, and he developed it from this. And the idea is that we access Okay, so integral eye movement therapy works on it works on the memories primarily. So someone might come to me with a problem emotion, and I need to think, okay, so how did they learn to feel this way? So then I get them to go back in time to the first time they can remember feeling that feeling. So they're accessing a memory in the past of where they first learnt to feel the bad feeling.
So they might not know what the memory is. They may just come to you with an anxiety or feeling.
They might come to me with a bad feeling, and I mean, it doesn't have to be the first memory ever.
No.
But there's a sequence of questions that I'll ask. Well, how familiar is the feeling? And what's the first time you can remember feeling this feeling? But it doesn't have to be the first time ever. It's just they're going back to a memory. So when they go back to, and they just access a memory, it could be last week, oh, I felt it last week. Okay, think of that memory. And then at the same time, while they're thinking of the memory, I just get them to follow. I just run different patterns with my finger, and they just follow the finger.
And what does that do exactly to the brain?
Right.
The finger. Okay. What does that do? Following the finger with the eyes.
Okay. So the optic nerve is kind of wired into a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is kind of think of it like. It's like the library. I heard someone describe this as it's like the librarian. So our brain is like a filing system of memories. Okay. So if someone, say for example, someone has an unpleasant experience and they can't, and then years later they're still thinking about that memory. In the moment during the unpleasant experience, it's like someone's come in with a load of books, and instead of it being filed, they're just thrown all over the place.
Oh, okay.
So they're never filed properly. So the brain hasn't had a way to sort it out. So the emotions are kind of stuck in the part of the brain called the amygdala. So it's like a filing error. Think of it like a filing error. The emotions and the memories are kind of stuck, and the brain can't process it. So by running the eye movement algorithms on the memory, it helps the amygdala to process the memories, and then they get filed into the correct part of the brain. So that's kind of how it works.
The brain's moved forward, then it's not stuck in the past memory, and the feeling then goes, the bad feeling goes, depression, anxiety, whatever it is.
Yeah, and that is one of so clients. This is one of the things that clients will often experience, is that while I'm doing the process, they can start to move forward in time. So that when they're originally thinking of the memory, there are various ways. Everyone processes differently. So for one client, for example, we might be working on a memory. And when they're thinking of the memory, it's just, memory is has very kind of strict beginning and end points. It's like an episode. And those the beginning and end points, so say something is unpleasant, then that can be quite a short period, of time. So that the end point is still traumatic. Then when you once you've run the process, the end points can start to move forward. Okay. So they can start to go forward in time. Other things that can happen, it becomes the memory originally might be like they're reliving it. They're in it. They're associated into the experience. So it's like they're reliving the memory. Another thing that can happen is they then when you ask them, okay, so when you think of the memory now, is it the same or different? And what can happen is that then they're dissociated. It's like they're looking at it. Oh, it's just like I'm observing it now. Or it's just a memory. That's a common thing. Oh, well, it's just a memory. Whereas originally it was an emotion connected with a memory. So the emotion, so it brings down the emotional, it desensitizes the memory. So it brings down the emotion, and then they can look at it from a different perspective. They might then see it from their adult self rather than rather than experiencing it as if they were there as a child or whenever it happened.
So what is, you mentioned NLP. Can you just explain to the viewers what exactly is NLP? Because it relates very well to the eye movement therapy.
Yeah. Okay. So NLP was originally developed by John Grinder and Richard Bandler, and it was developed as they studied successful therapists. That's kind of what they did. They modeled successful therapists, and what they wanted to know was, okay, how do people change? What is it that's happening on the inside of their heads that enable them to go from a stuck state to an unstuck state? But they also modeled the therapists in, okay, what is it the therapists were doing or saying that enabled those people to change? So they went into a huge amount of detail, basically deconstructing how we work as human beings, what happens on the inside of our heads, how language influences the thoughts and feelings and behaviours. So really NLP, I suppose you could describe it as the structure of human experience. And it's a big field, obviously, it's because it's a code for how we work, what's happening on the inside of a head. So to think we've got our senses, haven't we? We've got our all our senses: sight, sound, feelings, taste, touch, smell. And these are actually on the inside of our heads as well. So when we access a memory, for example, some people are visual. They might see it.
Oh yes,
they might see it visually. Might even remember what was said. Remember the feelings. Some people might even get a sense of the smells that were there. So it depends how vivid the memory is. But if the memory is very vivid, all the senses are engaged. And the way I suppose the way that it can relate to the integral eye movement therapy is how we access memories. So look, Lee. So for example, if I was to ask you something that you did last week that you enjoyed.
Oh, I did that singing thing in the choir, the Jubilee. We sang the Jubilee.
Right. Okay. So now, obviously, we're on Zoom here, so can't tell exactly which direction you looked.
Oh gosh, I'm being analysed. Okay.
I kind of saw you look over that direction.
Oh, did I? What way is that?
I think.
Is that left?
Right.
Right.
That was left, right?
Wow.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Okay, so let's try another one, right? So what are you planning to do next week? Got anything planned for next week?
I'm really bad at remembering my diary. I'm so sorry. I'm sure there is something.
I'll put you on the spot, right?
There might be more than one thing.
Right. Okay, right. So,
I need to remember. Right. I need to think of something that I'm.
Right, doesn't matter. You've already given me. So...
I'm sorry about this. We'll get there in the end.
You've already given me the answer. Don't worry.
Oh, can I say something over the next week and a half or so? I've got a special art workshop that I will be attending. Physical art workshop.
Right. But when I asked you and you were thinking, you looked up that way. Yeah, I'm mirroring you. So sorry. You look. So hold on. You looked up. So that would be that way, wouldn't it? because we're mirror. I'm just
yes.
mirror. So you looked up, kind of left.
Okay.
Up left.
Up left. Yeah. Top left.
Yeah. And when you were thinking about what you did last week, you looked right.
I looked right, but it wasn't top. You said it was in the middle or something.
Yeah, I couldn't really tell. It was right.
So what's going on there with the brain?
Right.
The brain?
Okay. So now there is a generalization with accessing memories. Generally, well, it depends on where you're born sometimes as well. So in the West, when we think of the past, we tend to look left up. Now you're the opposite. You seem to be the opposite. Yeah, you're kind of wired the other way around.
I'm not Western though.
Ah.
I'm half Arabic, half Greek, half Asian, half Greek. Okay. Is that something?
Yeah. Well, that's a whole research thing, isn't it?
Okay, that's your next task.
Don't know that. Don't know.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, this is a generalization. There are always exceptions. But in the West, when we think of the past, we can visual images. We look left and up for the past, and when we're thinking about something that we're doing in the future, that a visual image that we're doing from the future, we're looking right and up.
Is that because it's stored in that part of the brain? Is that why?
Well, it's just the way I don't know, but it's just the way. It's just the way we access memories. If we're accessing visual memories, we tend to look up in some way.
Really?
So visual memories up, and left for the past, right for the future. Okay. But in the East, we can think of they can think of the past as behind. Now you're not going to be looking behind, but
no.
So this. We could get into kind of things which are called timelines, past, future. In the East, past, future. People talk about going forward. I want to go forward in time. I don't want to look back into the past.
So that leads me on to the question about timeline therapy. I was going to ask you it a bit later, but I was going to ask you do time. That's one of the therapies. Timeline.
It's all related. Yeah, I mean, all this comes from NLP, so it all relates, and it's in our in our language as well. We use language you can sometimes tell what people's timelines are by listening to how they talk.
Really?
I want to go forward in time. I don't want to keep looking back into the past.
Okay.
Some people have. I want to go forward. Other people, they want to go. I want to go in the right direction. Yeah.
Or they just keep talking about the past.
Yeah, but think about the directional language. Going forward in time, or going in the right direction.
Oh, so it's the actual words they're using.
Words. Yeah.
You can decipher. You can things. You can
they give you clues about how their timelines are represented, whether they're this way, that way. But obviously the IEMT, the integral eye movement therapy, kind of exploits this. It's just how we access stuff. And I'm just talking about visually. We've got dialogue as well. If we're remembering a conversation, we might look that way. If we're thinking about what to say, we might look that way. We've all heard internal dialogue. We're just thinking to ourselves. We might look down. We might look down to the left. Accessing feelings is, this is in the field of NLP. This is kind of how it's mapped out. Looking down to the right. Heard the expression "downright miserable," right?
Oh yes, I have.
Looking down.
Okay.
And you always, and you might find, depressed people their posture tends to be kind of
Yes.
looking down, so they're in their feelings quite a lot.
Yeah.
And this was there was a very famous hypnotherapist called Milton Erickson, who was kind of the father of hypnosis, who used to just create. He was a psychiatrist, and a lot of the. I'm getting into the hypnotherapy stuff now. And so,
oh yes, I was going to ask you, but please do explain.
Digressing, but he exploited this whole idea. During his patients would come to him, and he just used to talk to them, but he talked to them in a specific way. Because he knew so much about language and how powerful language was. You know, there was a depressed client came to him, depressed patient. He set him a task to, okay, this week I want you to, when you're going around, I want you to study the rooftops of buildings and just discover all the different kinds of rooftops. So he set him a task. So that week this guy was going around looking up instead of looking down.
Up, didn't he?
Yeah. And that, you know, so there's things like that, you know, so it's all language and how accessing different aspects of the of directions of the eyes, but how the if still on the integral eye movement therapy, if you think about it, if someone is accessing a traumatic memory, that memory might be located somewhere in space. They might be accessing that memory, and whether they're looking at that directly and then accessing the feeling, there'll be a specific way that they'll be accessing it. So if you think about it, once they've accessed the memory and then you get them to look somewhere else, you're breaking the pattern. So they've got it's like, think of it like they've got a map of how to access the bad memory, the bad feeling.
I was going to ask you about this.
So you're breaking it. You're breaking their pattern. So you're disrupting their normal pattern.
Okay, it's interesting, Michael. One of my questions was, what keeps people repeating old behavioural patterns, old cycles, and how do you help them to break these unhealthy cycles? So you've just touched on it now, but it was interesting you mentioned. So what causes them, and how do you help them?
Okay, so I think this might be linked to, I think you mentioned about EMDR. Did you mention EMDR? EMDR, you didn't mention
EMDR, just quickly explain for viewers, how is that? It's very similar to IEMT, it's eye movement therapy, but how is it different?
Yeah. Okay, so I should say I haven't studied EMDR. So so I don't know that much about it.
It's slightly different.
Yeah, but it is different. But obviously they both use eye movements. EMDR has got 8 phases of therapy. It's a whole therapy. It's got 8 phases. They both are used for similar things. So that, you know, someone will come with a problem. EMDR, IEMT, they can both be used for the same kind of things. EMDR works on feelings, so they work directly on the feelings themselves. IEMT works on memory. And
feelings.
Memory.
Just memory. Okay, that's interesting.
It uses feelings as an IEMT uses feeling, obviously the issue, the original feeling, to go back to the memory.
Okay, whereas EMDR is just mainly
works on the feeling.
Okay.
So EMDR works on the feeling. IEMT will track it back to the memory of where the feeling got created. So it works directly on the memory.
And that's what you do.
So there's a few other differences. EMDR when it's done the therapy, they'll use affirmations. So they'll attempt to install new thoughts. It also works on beliefs. EMDR works on beliefs and feelings. They'll add affirmations, so positive affirmations afterwards. IEMT will work on memories and identity. So IEMT will work on identity, not beliefs. There's obviously there's an interplay between the two, and we don't with IEMT we don't install anything afterwards. We don't install new things.
You let it process itself.
Let it process.
Processes its own outcome.
Yeah.
Whether it goes forward or back.
Yeah.
Because it can go back and die, can't it? The memory can die.
It can do.
Or it can go forward.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
It can, as we know, it can go forward, can't it? And then change into, and that's just briefly, can you explain the timeline therapy where you get people standing up and walking on a timeline? Can you tell the viewers about that, because it links to this? You
did ask me about how people get stuck, didn't you?
Yes,
what stops people from getting changed?
Perfectly. Yes, so they relate together.
Right. Now, integral eye movement therapy is based on 5 patterns of chronicity. Okay. Right. So the eye movement itself is only a part of the system, but it's actually based on 5 patterns of chronicity, which means that there are 5 kind of behaviours or patterns that people display. People that can't, that just, sometimes you get people that go to numerous therapies and they just can't change. They chronically just are stuck no matter what they do. And so the developer of IEMT, and Andy Austin, he discovered these 5 patterns of chronicity, he calls them, that people display. So so this is the backbone of the integral eye movement therapy. And all the time that when I'm going through the process, these things are in the back of my mind. I'm listening out for things in people's conversation as, okay, that's a pattern. That's one of the things that needs to be addressed to get them from being stuck. I can go through the patterns if you want. There are 5.
Oh, yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. The first one is like an abreaction process. So let me give you an example. Say I have a client that comes to me and I start working with them and they start to get upset with what I do. They're getting frustrated. This just isn't working. This is annoying me. So if I get that, I think, okay, that sounds like, okay, stage 1. And if I ignore that and keep going, they might get more and more angry until eventually they go, look what you've done. Now I've got a headache. And so there are 3 stages. They'll escalate the emotion until you stop. Now, how is this a problem? If someone has a problem and they want to fix that problem, they may have trained everyone else around them, their family, their friends, not to get them to feel the problem. Oh, he knows how bad, he knows how that affects me. Why does he keep doing that? He knows how that affects me and how that upsets me. So they can train their friends and family not to do something which makes them feel the bad feeling. It's an avoidance strategy. So it's a way that they can avoid dealing with their problem. So they use emotion. It could be crying, it could be anger, to train everyone else not to get them to feel bad. And if they've successfully trained everyone else, it could be family, it could be health professionals, then they've created a system around themselves, so they then never have to deal with the actual problem. So when someone comes to me and they start, so my job in that situation, it happens very rarely, but if I see this happening where they start to escalate in terms of emotion, it could, you know, I have to not be affected by it and realize, okay, my job is actually get them to feel that. My job isn't to make them happy. My job is to create change. So them feeling bad is not actually my problem. My job there is to get them to change. So I might want to get them to feel that, and then I'll go in with the feeling. Okay, so you're feeling quite angry now. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is the anger? And when's the first time you can remember feeling this feeling? And then I can run the eye movement on that feeling. Whereas a lot of therapists, you know, a lot of other therapists that aren't aware of that will just go, oh, we'll do something else. Don't worry, we'll do something else if that's not working with you. And then they've completely missed the point that actually is that's something that's in place that is locking it in place and keeping them stuck. So that's one of the patterns. Does that make sense?
So that's how you break that, help them break that pattern, is to remove that behavior by doing the eye movement, tracing it back to the memory, because it could be something that's happened to them. When they were small or something.
Number 2 is the what if. People that come up with what if questions. Oh, but what if this? What if this happens? What if I? So okay, say anxiety or panic attacks. I might do some work with someone. Oh, but what if I get on a train, and what if I get on a train and what if I got on a train and I get a panic attack?
Nothing, just get one and that's it.
The thing is with what ifs, they already know the answer. They already know the answer, and it's an anxiety producing loop. It's a circular. It's a circle. What if? Well, then what? Then I'll have a panic attack, and then what?
Exactly.
You know, so there's a circular logic to this. So I listen out for these, because there's and there might be an identity thing at the end. Then so I find out basically if I hear a what if. I'll work out what the last statement is in the loop. So I'll explore the loop and find out what's at the end of it.
Because they might not know.
They won't know
what it is,
because they just all they hear in their head is what if.
What
if this happens?
2 words.
Okay. But if you explore a little bit further, well, okay, what if you have a panic attack? Then what? Then I'm useless, or I'm a failure. So no, I am a failure. Well, that's an identity statement. So
that's interesting.
I am statement is so then I'll maybe work with the identity.
And that's fragmentation. You call it fragmentation when the identity is they have different viewpoints of themselves. And it's not always what other people think, but they'll think other people are thinking it. And it's their perception, but it's fragmented. It's interesting. So you try to integrate it all, because there's different types of identity problems, isn't there? There's different. Not all the same thing. It's different fragmentation.
Exactly.
And you break the cycle then, the circle. Okay. Interesting. And it's not a quick fix either, is it? It's something that takes time.
Everyone's different, really.
Everyone's different. I
mean, everyone's different. I mean, so, you know, with something that's been going on a long time, you have to be realistic. You know, there's things can take time. Some things can be, you know, if it's you know, a one-off incident, if it can be quite quick to fix. So number 3 is he calls it the maybe man phenomenon.
Maybe indecision.
where people are just unsure of their own experience. So for example, and this is built into the model. So, okay, so someone comes to me with a bad feeling. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is the feeling? Well, I think it might maybe be a 6 or a 7. Well, what is it? Is it a 6 or is it a 7? Well, I think it's a 7. Well, what is it? Is it a 6 or a 7? Yeah. And the problem with this is that they're unsure of their own experience. So everything becomes uncertain. So they're uncertain of everything. So they constantly have anxiety because they don't know their own. It just creates uncertainty
in everything, so in everyday life, everything.
Yeah. So you just nail them on it, really. Okay, what in everyday life, everything becomes uncertain. Decisions, they become indecisive about everything. They can't make decisions. What if I make the wrong decision? It can then interplay into other things as well. If I might make the wrong decision and it goes wrong, or maybe I should do that, maybe I should do that, and they just don't know. So if you can create certainty, even at some level, it will start to spread it across into other things. So it's just forcing uncertainty, forcing certainty.
And they start to use different language then, so they don't use the maybe. They'll just straight away say, oh, it's a 6.
They'll start to make
decisions. That you've broken the cycle of the maybe indecision.
Yeah. Number 4 is is someone that tests for evidence of the problem rather than testing for change.
It's an interesting one.
Okay, so I might, and this is a common thing. Someone will come for therapy, you do therapy, and then when they go away in the week, you can get 2 types of people. The ones that will look on the things that, it's the glass half full or glass half empty kind of thing, really. One person will go, okay, this is better, and they'll start looking at all the positive changes. The other person might go, oh yeah, but I still do this, and this is still happening to me, and this is still happening, this is still happening, this is still happening. So it's getting them to look at the positive changes and focus on the positive changes. And so when I'm running the eye movement therapy, this is why I say to people before and afterwards, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is the feeling? And then after the process, okay, how strong is the feeling now? So you're proving the change to them. Because if you don't do that, you've got no. So the idea, so you have to prove to people that there's been change.
Yes, with the numbers.
With the numbers, at the score. So if they then realise, okay, well, the feeling was a 10 out of 10. Now it's an 8 out of 10. So it must have changed. So you're kind of proving to them that there is change. So that's kind of that one. Okay. The other one is being at effect rather than being at cause. So this is where things are happening to you wouldn't believe what happened to me this week. Stuff that happens to people, so they're not they have no control over their own environment. So so let me think as an example. That's my cat here. So this is, people have a sense of hopelessness. This can be the people who moan about stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. So if they're moaning about stuff all the time, about stuff that's happening to them, that stuff that's constantly happens to them, rather than taking control over their own experience and their own life. Mm. And obviously in so in therapy,
It's fine.
really distracting me.
It wants to know what's going on.
Yeah, it wants to know what's going on. Yeah. Oh, now it's biting things.
So, is it biting you now?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Right, let's start this again, shall we? We'll have to edit this.
Oh, okay, then we'll start again. Okay. But I like that with the cat. It made it more.
Did you?
It made it.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was talking about, did I? Right. So being
Can I leave it in
rather
with
than
the
being
cat? Can I leave it in?
Leave it in, really?
Okay, let's edit it. Okay.
Well,
Go through number 4.
You're the boss. You're the boss. Right, so being at effect rather than being at cause. Okay, so this is really about the people that moan about stuff happening to them. So they have no ability to control their own experience. They think that feelings happen to them and don't understand that actually it's all being generated by themselves in some way. So now NLP is quite useful for this as well. Is NLP, or the eye movement process, shows people how their minds work and how the feelings are created from memories. They don't just happen on their own. So when you think of a memory, then the feeling comes out of that memory. And for example, if after the process, if the memory might then seem less vivid, so then the feeling is less. So how there's an interplay between how you access a memory and what it's like afterwards. And then when the perspective on the memory changes, the feeling is less. So it's how you interpret the memory. So often this is one of the things that, you know, clients will experience is then, well, yeah, it happened to me, but now I see it from a different perspective. So it's the meaning changes. So then when the meaning changes, the feelings can change. So, but in therapy, another way that this can be used, if I have a client and I'm just trying to get them to access a memory or trying to run through the process, and they start giving me long-winded, oh well, it's because, you know, this happened to me and this happened, and they start going into the story of all the stuff that happened to them. I have to stop them and just say, stop. Might be interesting, but it's not relevant. And they might be quite shocked by that, because there's, you know, I'm kind of breaking rapport really at that point by trying to get them to just run through the process and not telling me the story of what happened to them. So it's like interrupting their pattern. And, you know, we all know people like this, that they might phone you up to complain about what happened to them, you know, years ago, sometimes in relationships, or, you know, and it's like they want you to kind of, oh, it's okay, you'll feel better, and they want that kind of thing.
That leads me on to something about illnesses, because when people keep, this is a fascinating question I just remembered to ask you, it's not on my question list. An illness it stems from the mind originally, or like the psychosomatic part. It can keep somebody in an illness so they get secondary benefits, which is people that look after them. How does that work? Because you work with that. I think I read a review where you removed somebody's pain or something, because it's linked to the brain, isn't it? So they're thinking they keep themselves in a certain state of an illness, or maybe they'll have a skip, or I don't know what it is, but
we call it secondary benefits.
Secondary benefits.
So there might be a benefit to having that illness. Yeah, you've got to explore all that stuff really.
Because sometimes they don't have an illness, do they? Or they might think they've got a pain or something, and then it was really related to a memory or something, or they'll have like a stick. I've seen it with people with sticks. I knew a lady, a friend, she had a stick, and she didn't need the stick, she said, but she was really, because she had an injury in the hip or something, and she was starting to rely on it because the secondary benefits were people would give up their seat or give her attention. Then she realized that her business wasn't running very well or something, they were taking advantage, so she got rid of the stick and then she was fine. But it's an interesting thing to hear that, isn't it? The secondary benefits of illnesses or certain behaviours with being ill.
I mean, this is it. Okay, so if someone comes to me that's had a work-related accident, probably not a good idea to work with them until the insurance has come through.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you said, you've mentioned,
because they might not get better until they've got the insurance money.
So you've actually seen this yourself firsthand with patients. It
can happen. You just have to be aware of it. It's just something you have to be aware of. Otherwise, you can end up really frustrated doing loads of therapy and not get anywhere, because obviously they've got a vested interest in not getting better. So this is why sometimes it's important to take to find out, okay, what's going on, to take a case history. So I always take a case history of people to find out what's going on in their life, and how long have they had the problem, and what was going, so when did the problem start and what was going on around that time, to see if there's anything else that's related. And so sometimes you can't always tell, because that you can't assume they're going to tell you everything. So sometimes it can get missed, but you just have to be aware that okay, people don't necessarily, they might come to you for therapy, but they might not necessarily at some level want to. There might be a reason why they don't want to get better.
So you go deep into
and
that,
you have to find out what that is. Sometimes you have to, and that can be tricky.
And that's breaking that cycle, isn't it? The cycle of some people have hypochondria.
Well, that's like
hypochondria, where they think they're ill, or they'll complain. I've known friends that have complained on a daily basis about their health.
And that that could be they get family support, or they get sympathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one, isn't it? Attention.
If they weren't given something to talk about, and so they get sympathy, or that kind of thing.
If they weren't given sympathy as a child,
sometimes you have to work. Okay, if you work out, okay, if that's what's going on, then what is it they really try? So then you might have to explore that